everybody. Welcome to the Daily Huddle on Tuesdays, where Tara and I talk about relationships and communication because we know how important that is to building families and communities and better businesses. And today we are going to talk about team building. Are you aware of the evolution of team building? Tara and I had a conversation about how it's changed over the years. And so we wanted to bring that here and hear what other people had to say about it and sort of what that means for us who lead teams.
Yeah, yeah, let's dig in. Um, you know, I think that we all are aware of how much it's changed, but I don't know about you, Catherine, but I think it would be fun to talk about how it used to be. And I think the way I look at it is that there's so much more of an emphasis on team building, not as much as the fact that it's changed, but it's become a priority because leaders are seeing that it drives performance. So what I wanted to dig into before we talk about today's team building focus and how it's changed is how it used to be.
Okay.
And who do you think I researched to shine a light on how team building used to be?
Used to be, I don't know. I'm Silent Cynic is coming to mind, but I don't know.
Okay, so I'm going way, 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 way back to one of the most, I think, celebrated leaders of all time. He's gone now, and he was the CEO of GE for over 20, for right at 20 years, Jack Welch. Does that name ring a bell to you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he was very much celebrated as a leader. And the reason why is because when he took over GE in 1981, it was worth $14 billion. 19, almost 20 years later, it was worth $600 billion.
Wow.
So everybody wanted to know what Jack Welch was doing, how he did it, and how he built such an unbelievable organization. But do you know that 10 years after he retired, the company almost tanked? And that's
Whoa.
pretty fascinating. Now they blame it on the combustion of the global economy with the subprime lending. Um, but that is because of his philosophy. But I think one of the most interesting pieces of how he managed teams would shock people today. And some of you all might know he had this ranking system. And no matter how you performed, no matter how you showed up at work, he would have these different intervals where if you were in the bottom 10% as it related to performance, you're cut. He just
Wow.
firing people that were in the bottom 10%. So what do you think that did to teams? Like imagine that
Well, wait a
you
minute though. You said it had nothing to do with how they showed up to work or how they were performing, but surely the ranking system had to do with how they showed up at work and how they were performing so that they were not, is that right?
Okay, yeah. So I misspoke. It had nothing to do with like they're trying, they're learning. It's like if they were in the bottom 10% of performance, they're fired. And I don't know how
Got it.
often he did this, but it was called his rank and yank system. And I think
Okay.
it went on for years and years. And so what if we were doing that today to people on teams? You're a leader in a corporation, you lead a team. What if that's what you communicated to them? The bottom 10% of you will be gone.
Well, honestly, I think it could go a couple different ways because it
Okay.
also depends on how the culture is supporting, like how the rest of leadership is supporting, or leadership is supporting the rest of the culture. In one way, it could have people be really excited and perform and know that actually I do really well at my job. I'm really good at it. So I'm good. I just keep and I want people around me who do really well. So that's really exciting. And also, if I'm doing really well, losing the bottom 10%, there's a drag. Like that's a drag on a team, right? Like you have to work harder around those folks. You've got to give them more support, or you've got to carry a load that they're not carrying if they're not performing. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that it could instill fear in a team. Oh no. So it depends on, that's why I say that how leadership supports the rest of the culture. If this is very out in the open and it's very well understood how the ranking system works and what you need to do to perform, if you're in the right role with the right skill set, you'll perform and it's not a big deal. And if you're not, you need to find another job.
Right.
But if that isn't visible or clear for folks, then it just instills fear and gets your nervous system going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's like, well, I don't know. Am I not? Am I going to be cut? And then that doesn't help a team at all.
Right.
So it depends on how the rest of the system worked, but it could really work well.
Well, apparently it worked for him for a long time. My thinking is, this is where I think it dives in today. Think how many personality assessments are out there that company. I don't even know of someone who has a decent sized organization that is not tied to some personality assessment. And the reason why I bring that up is that some people might be motivated by that, like the lowest performing people will be gone, and that makes them feel aggressive and competitive and very motivated, whereas some people that could shut them down just based on the way they're wired. What makes me sad about it is if I'm a leader, let's say I'm a coach because I love coaching stories. Every single person on my team is going to be a performer. That's why they're there. And so no matter how well they're doing, it still says you're going to have to compete with your colleagues or you're going to be gone. Even if you do a great job, I mean,
I would challenge that in a couple of different ways because again, I don't know about the system, but it didn't say you were competing against your colleagues. And so it's very possible that you are competing in your own job. There's performance to be done in your own job so that you're not actually pitted against your colleagues because you're right, that's not good. But I don't know, I'm going to take probably what sounds like maybe an unpopular opinion to say, actually, if you're in the right role, in the right company with the culture that really you thrive in, then that system could work for you. If you're not, meaning your personality doesn't fit and that shuts you down, it's not the right culture for you. So I think oftentimes what I find in today is that we do take a much softer approach. Either we take a softer approach or it's just like, slash and burn without a lot of understanding, clarity, assessment, measurement. And I don't think either of those really work well for a business. A business needs to perform in order to sustain itself, period.
Yeah.
And we want to take care of our people and we want to, but we want to build a culture that does that, not at the expense of the business. I think that's where it gets murky sometimes.
So help me understand how, if you have built a performing team, how could you justify cutting the lowest 10% of the performers if they're still doing
no, that's a good question. Again, I don't know how it works. So it's like if you are, maybe there's a way in which the team is actually really performing. And so, therefore that is, yeah, that would be hard if I felt like my entire team was performing. And I wonder if there is some thinking, and I mean, he was successful to the fact that actually, if you're performing at that level, you could be performing at a higher level. And therefore, by cutting the lowest 10%, it elevates you to the next level,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if it was team-based, could be company-wide.
Yeah. I don't know the details of it. I just know that he was known for that. I'll tell you something interesting. When I was given the job of being the national vice president of sales for a corporation years ago, there was 120 sales reps, and they all reported up into 12 sales managers. And this is just coming into my head as we're talking through this. The general manager came to me, sat me down, and said, "You need 10 managers, not 12. You have to get rid of 2 of them." That was awful. And so I had to, of course, look at numbers, but I couldn't separate how I felt about, they were ironically all men, how I felt about these gentlemen versus the numbers on a spreadsheet, because I knew about the factors that went into their performance. Like one of them whose numbers weren't very good had a really tough territory. Had always been consumed by the competitor, and he was fighting just to make a name for our company there. Whereas the guy in the southeast part of the country, our company was, considered the very, very best. And so of course his numbers were higher. And I ended up getting rid of that guy in the southeast. It was very, very unpopular. But he was, somebody said this one time, said that he could be sitting in a rocking chair down there and still win because he had absolute champions on his team. So
Interesting.
I mean, there's that. I guess that's where, today, let's go back to our question of how has team building changed? And to me, there's a huge focus on EQ. And
Mhm.
that opens up a whole nother conversation. How do you think it's changed?
Well, the biggest change that I think I've seen is this model from like, and this still exists in a lot of companies, but the top-down leadership, sort of, here's the directive, you will do what I say. The way I've seen it sort of evolve and change is that it often is leaning into the teams. You hire the right people, you lean into their leadership. Of course, you've got to give directives as a leadership team. You have to say where we're going, what is our strategy, what is our mission and vision. But and maybe this is just in the company that I work in, because I know a lot of people who work in big corporate, and it's still this way. It's just a across the board directive. Doesn't make any sense to the folks who are actually on the line or working, individual contributors who are the ones who know a lot about how it operates.
Mhm.
But I have seen that shift over time, is that in a lot more ways, the wisdom and knowledge of the team members is being considered and brought into the conversation.
Mhm. I want to ask you this because you swim in this world. And so here's where I think we could take some learning from this. I think we understand how leadership and team building has changed, and collaboration is so much more valued, and people's quality of work and their connection to team. But what I see with some of the companies that I work with as a consultant is they voice that they think these are the right values. The values are on the website, and they're on the wall. And we value work-life balance, and we value open communication and things like that. But when they get behind closed doors away from the team, they're not really living that. They still have this top-down, fear-based kind of mentality. And to me, that's a sign of lack of trust in yourself first and then team.
Yeah.
And so how could we work towards helping teams to really, really build what we know is an effective, great work-life balance, great collaboration, and still high performing all at the same time? What do you think the ingredients are there?
Well, I think leadership has to work on themselves first. I mean, when I coach solopreneurs, for instance, because it's just an easier, simpler look, any issue that they're having in their business is an issue that they're having with themselves.
Mhm.
And so people have to do their individual personal work, because if they get triggered by anything, it could be a team member, it could be, they're going to react in a way that isn't conducive for the goals of the company, let's just say, unless they have an extreme self-management, which is also a valued skill. So I think, wait, I'm getting off track. What was the question? The specific question you asked?
How do we make that real instead of just what
Yeah.
people say?
Well, like I said, I mean, people have to live the values, because I mean, people see it. You can
Mhm.
say one thing, but if you're not acting that way or living that life, if people know that, that as well as anybody. The other thing that I think is interesting that I've noticed is that people will make up things no matter what. Like, people make up things and have their own lived experience based on their own lived experience. So
Mhm.
even if somebody is coming in and doing all the right things as a leader, if there's somebody on the team who just hasn't, like, let's say they've lived a lot of trauma and they just always are expecting the other shoe to drop, they're not going to trust. They're not going to trust that leader, and that leader can't do anything really to instill. That is the person's responsibility, to trust the leadership.
Mhm.
So I think it goes both ways. I think that's also how it's changed. I think it used to be demanded that people trust. There's a lot of demands, I think, in the team building in the past, if you will. But
Mhm.
now I think, so, and that's a tough one, right? Because you got to choose you got to choose the right people. Like, are they going to be able to trust you in your leadership even when you make difficult decisions?
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know if
And
that's an answer to how we do this, because I think that's a
well,
tough
I'll tell you what my frustration continues to be, or it's not really a frustration, it's a challenge. And so I'm going to do a workshop in January for a team that I've worked with before, but they've grown. And I always do, Catherine, these discovery calls where I get on the um, Zoom with about 3 or 4 team members. And one of the people that came on there said, I can't wait for you to come back. I loved your stories. I loved our activities. It was so great. We all felt so close. Somebody else came on the Zoom that I had worked with, and he said, is this going to be another emotional bloodbath?
Oh dear.
I was like, so I've got like half the team like really ready to open up and be vulnerable and connect. And close to half the team, I would say, like, that's not for me. That's not for work. So I love that Lori came on camera. She might have some insight here. But I mean, how do you unite a team that's kind of they coming from completely two different mindsets as it relates to team building?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear what Lori has to say.
Yeah. Lori, tell us before you answer the question, I'll remind you what it was. Just give us a little snippet of your amazing background with the company that you built so people know where you're coming from.
Okay, well, I was in a family distribution business, wholesale distribution. And in 1986, the business closed due to the people who have bought it made it go bankrupt. And we started from scratch in 86, and we built it to a $1.3 billion company servicing 9 states. And then it's been sold. It was sold in 2019 again. But team building, teams are critical to a business. People are critical to a business. Okay. And you might have some people don't work well on the team. And you really have to figure out why, what's going on. Okay. I was always with my teams, getting information from them. What are they seeing? How can we do this better? When you're a leader, it's not do it my way, except maybe occasionally, because there are sometimes it has to be done quickly. You get a much better result when you get input from the team. You have to realize the team are your subject matter experts. That's how you choose the
Love
team.
that.
Okay. I might make a cross-functional team for certain projects, or it might be the IT team just for certain projects or portions of the projects. You have to look at what their skills are. What do they bring in and how can you use it the best? Like I said, some people weren't always team players, then you have to talk to them and see what's happening for them.
Where do you think that comes from? Someone not being a team player?
Sometimes people, sometimes people are just difficult to deal with. Okay, and don't work well with others, to be quite honest. And then you kind of have to work around them. But why would someone not be a team player? They don't see an advantage to it. They see a disadvantage. They might have to do more work to get things accomplished because you can be doing the work based on the needs of the users and the project, not what someone thinks needs to be done necessarily. Again, like I said, if you have a team, you get better results.
Mm-hmm.
You get better input. I mean, I ran cross-functional teams all the time since I started in business. Even since I worked for IBM, we were doing a project. We were a major cross-functional team from all different areas who were going to get affected by the project.
And did you have some focus on team building exercises outside of just getting the work done and trying to communicate well?
Well, company did, once a year, but once a year is not really what I call, it's fun. But for me, a team building exercise is more like I came from a background where my business degree undergraduate was from BU, and my thing I loved was from organizational behavior. It was participative management.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came into the family business in 1980, I used that, and I would get people to, you know, we'd have meetings about things. It wasn't just me saying this has to be done. It was more cooperative effort. And we accomplished a lot with a small team, a heck of a lot, you know. And the other thing is always teach the people on your team. Always let them know the why something needs to be done. It's critical. It's not just do this, it's like this needs to be done because XYZ.
Mhm.
And what you get is are people more committed. And when you do participative management, which of course is a big part of emotional intelligence. So I was pre-emotional intelligence, but a lot of things I did, you can find it in there.
Right.
So when you work with your team, get the feedback, say this is what we need to do, and get the feedback, you have a much stronger team and you have people who want to work towards a goal. And
Mhm.
that's what you want. People want to work towards the goal.
Yeah, you said something that I think I really want to hear what you have to say on this too, Catherine. But you said something that really I think is worth repeating. And you said to tell them why they're doing what they're doing. And to me, that builds trust. I had a manager once who was always so stressed out, but he would never express to anybody what was headed his way as it related to his facing the board. He just was
Mhm.
always grumpy, always grouchy. And he eventually told me that I don't think that I should put my concerns on the team. And I'm like, why not? It would make us understand why you're making these decisions if we understood what you were facing. And
Yeah,
he didn't see it as necessarily good for the company. It was just what was being put on him. And if that's what, he didn't have any control over that, right? But to share that with his team, I thought would be a great team building opportunity.
it is. You can't solve problems properly if people don't know what's going on.
Mhm.
Okay. You're basically managing the outcome by allowing them, your team, to give their input. And I got some great ideas from my teams because I didn't feel it was my teams. I felt we were a team. There's a big difference there.
Mm.
Uh, and I love setting up cross-functional teams. I did,
What do you mean by that? I don't really know what you mean by
all
that.
right.
I mean,
So
I know what the
cross-functional
words
team.
mean, but I mean, give an example.
All right, I'll give you an example. In, God, was it 20, I think it was 2010. You know, all the privacy laws and all that. Well, if you had, in Massachusetts, we had to set up a WISP, which is a written information security protocol or procedures. And I got everybody from every department that would be affected by these into a meeting. In this
Okay.
case, we then determined which departments would be affected by the privacy law. And once we determined our department wasn't needed, our department head wasn't needed, they didn't have to come to the meetings anymore. Because don't forget, meetings take time. Meetings take, are great for productivity, but also they take away from other, being productive in other projects, other things.
Sure.
So, yeah, it was a 6-month process of meetings and going through our whole systems. We had transportation, the transportation department. We had accounts receivable. I outlined this all in my book, by the way. People, process, profit. It's all in my book, creating cross-functional teams. Um, Customer service, accounts payable, of course, IT had to be there. All the different departments.
And so you're saying that one of the benefits, this is what I'm imagining, is that when you bring people from all these different teams together to create a team for a specific project, then they begin to understand what everybody else faces in their role, which I would think would be a
That's
huge benefit.
very true. That is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
In this case, it was like defining new procedures for the whole company,
Mhm.
and putting in checks and balances and locks in certain areas, literally locks, taking
Yeah.
information off the computer that wasn't really necessary. A lot of changes, HR too.
Yeah.
And other times it's like, um, other cross-functional teams are based upon the project. All right, but then there's also the weekly cross-functional teams, such as um, in our warehouse, we have they have a meeting every week. Quality of order. What went wrong this week? What can we do better?
Did you see over time, did you see a change in the people that you're hiring and what their expectations were for their work? Like, millennials and then Gen Z versus the baby boomers. Did you experience that? Like there's so much
I,
conversation around?
I don't think we really discussed it like that.
Hmm.
Okay. Did we have to change? We probably had to change how we taught millennials.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Um, just a little tweaking. It wasn't that bad.
That means you're already taking care of your people is that's how I kind of translate that.
You have to
We
take
give
care.
so much crap to millennials and Gen Z. I think they bring so much goodness to companies and organizations because they're not as afraid of their emotions.
Yeah.
It used to be that you just went to work, kept your head down, and just worked as hard as you could. And however you felt about things, and if things weren't comfortable, it was completely irrelevant. And that's changed. So,
It has changed.
um, yeah, I know we're kind of short on time, but Catherine, I want to take it back to you before we get away and ask you the question. If you do have people on a team who some are very much wanting to be connected emotionally and some aren't, how do you manage that as a leader? How do you
Yeah,
build that team?
I so appreciate what everything that Lori said because I think it's so true. Because I think if you're, I mean, it's very simple. What she described is you ask your people, you talk to them, what's going on. If somebody's difficult to get along with, what's going on there. So, I mean, if the question is if you have people who are super emotional and super not, how do you bring those together? I've been in that situation, and it's really, I think, being aware of what's happening in the room, and reading their energy, looking at their body language, and it might be a side conversation with them, and we're direct one-on-one, like, hey, I'm noticing this, what's going on? And they may not even be aware of it. So I think the answer to that is probably creating, dynamic exchanges, interactions, and ways to run projects and teams that addresses each one and how everybody operates. I mean, you can't cater to each individual person all the time. But if you're unaware of it and you're just going, oh, well, I don't care. We're an emotional team. We're just going to do this. Bring your feelings. Let's do it. You're going to lose, half the room.
No. And some people, like my husband, he can never fully go there. It's not how he's made.
Yeah.
And the last thing we want to do is make people awkwardly uncomfortable, right? I mean, everyone's like, oh, get out of your comfort zone, but that's only when you're striving toward change. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we have to accept some people are not going to want to go there. And that doesn't mean they're not a very solid, strong, trusted member of a team. Do you
Yeah.
think?
I think that's true. And I just think the other piece is what's the purpose of this? What's the end goal that I'm looking for? If it's, to build the team and to get to an expected outcome, great. Then let's, and this is the way I think we're going to do it. I don't think going, like I said, super emotional, having one, sweeping way of doing things is the way to do that. But you got to keep the goal in mind. We want these people to come together, get connected so that they're more productive on their teams and toward the end outcome.
Yeah. Awesome.
I also think that if you have someone who has difficulty working within the team, but you know what they're good at, you can define with them what they need to do. You take the information from the team meeting, and then from that team meeting, you say, here, you literally define it. This is what we need. And what what can you do about it? And then they come right on board. But that a lot of times has to be a side meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great
You know.
I
point.
love that.
Well, this has been a really, really solid conversation, something different, especially for me. And it's been energizing. So thank you for all your contributions, Lori and Catherine. Thank you for
Pleasure.
all your wisdom and expertise. And,
Thank you.
you know, we haven't mentioned something, so I'll start by closing us out with our tenets. Every once in a while, I read about leaders that say they're not afraid of the word love. And some people roll their eyes at that, but I think it really, really is a great place to start, and that's by leading with love. So remember to lead with love and to communicate with team members, family members, community members with love. And remember to give of your time, of your heart, of your spirit, your vulnerability. Remember not to take life too seriously. Throw your head back and laugh, which will help you to stress less. What will also help that is to eat more plants, get your sleep, and get up and move that body. Thank you all for being here on the Daily Huddle, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.